Good afternoon. My name is Jay and I'm Codependent. I'm going to be presenting from over here. I don't know if that affects anything about your seating or the placement of your chair or anything like that, but everything I'm talking about is up on the front board there, so just so you know. Again, my name's Jay, and I've got my email up there. I'm not going to read it into the microphone, but if you have any questions, feel free to email me. If you find something cool that I didn't talk about or isn't listed on the worksheets, you are welcome to email me and be excited about cool things. I get very excited about cool things as well, especially when it comes to the book. Not only do I identify as a codependent, I also identify as a book thumper. And what that means is when I'm in doubt, I go to the book. So, what this is yet another way to go through the steps. I know, I'm excited too. Little excited puppy barking. You can do this for yourself and drag your sponsor through it, or you can use this with your sponsees, and it gives a fantastic method for knowing what comes next and that sort of thing. I'm going to talk a little bit about this first page, and then I'm going to take your suggestions on where we go from there. What we're doing is setting up a sort of pattern for working the steps with a sponsee. And the pattern is basically the sponsee is going to read the book. The sponsee and the sponsor are going to have a conversation. And then the sponsee is going to go through the book again. And the second time through, the sponsee is going to do some underlining, some highlighting, a bunch of writing, etc. Then they'll talk again. The sponsee will do some work. You'll talk again. And then you'll go through the book again. And I'll go through that a little bit slower with more detail right now. I tell my sponsees that if they've got a question, they can write about it. They can write in a journal what their question is, or they can put a question mark right in the book. I'm a big proponent of writing directly in the book, and that's a way to make it ours. The sponsee is going to read a section. They're going to mark questions in the book, comments, concerns, and so on. Then the sponsor and sponsee are going to have a meeting. It might be in person. It might be on the phone. It might be via Skype. And they're going to discuss those questions, the comments, the concerns. I suggest that numbering the paragraphs is a wonderful thing. And I start at the beginning of each step. So here's step 1. And each step begins with the step itself. And then it usually has paragraphs that are cribbed from the CoDA 12 Steps Handbook. So I don't number those. I letter them. And I start the paragraphing after that. So as you can see, I put the numbers at the beginning of each paragraph. And that way, if we're not meeting in person, we can talk about, oh, I'm in paragraph 4, and it's much easier to find. You're probably aware that there are 2 different editions of the book right now. The second and first editions have the old versions of the patterns and characteristics. The third edition and all subsequent editions have all of the new patterns and characteristics, which means that all the pages are off in the third edition, and if there are any later editions, that'll be the case as well. So it gets confusing. You may have noticed in book meetings where people say, oh, it's on page 25. Mine's on page 26. Oh, yeah, different edition kind of thing. So that's setting up the book. And then the sponsee goes through and circles every we must in the section. Also, you might find words like imperative. And rereads the section and color codes via underline and other useful notation. The colors don't matter. As a sponsor, I usually suggest very strongly to my sponsees that they use the colors that I did, just for clarity. Oh, I underlined this in yellow, and I know, okay, yellow is warnings, or whatever it is in my book, etc. So the reason why there are these little spaces here is if you had your book and you wanted to highlight in color, you can take your magic colored pencil and put the color next to it, thereby reminding yourself what your colors are, etc. I picked up a blue pencil that is broken. But the things that we're looking for are prayers. I do prayers in my book in purple. I'm going to use pink here today. Warnings. Times where the book specifically warns about things that might be going on. Usually this is phrased as, some of us do a thing. And it could be become afraid. It could be ask whether we can get away with not doing this. Many different things. So I underline those things in yellow. Action items are things the book suggests that we do. I do that in orange. I didn't pick up orange. So how about dark green for funsies? The promises I do in blue. And this is outcome the book asserts that we will see. Usually, but not always, found at the end of a step. Sometimes they start way early, like midway through a step. And the promises are great because it lets us know what we might be looking for. And last but not least, I'm glad that an esteemed speaker earlier in the day mentioned this. There are a lot of times where the book is going to say, hey, some of the things we're talking about here are very complicated, and we might seek out additional support in addition to our CODA program, including therapy, outpatient support, literature. We don't, in CODA, recommend any of those literature things, but we do acknowledge that there is literature out there. And it can help many of us based on the things we're looking for. And that's why books have words on the back jacket, so we can find out whether it's going to be useful, etc. So, as a sponsor, this is something that I look for. And this is important because it helps us remember what is not our job. These are not always so clear-cut. Discussion with sponsor and other supportive people enables the sponsee to take what they like and leave the rest. My sponsees and I almost never agree on what is a warning and what is an action item. We especially don't agree on what's an action item. Because, of course, I find things that I think would be helpful, and sometimes they're not quite ready. And okay, that's fine. We can agree that that's something else until you're ready. So, after that, the sponsor-sponsee come together to discuss how to work the step. The sponsor might give tips or experience, additional things to consider. And we've got the 2 bullets here to let us know what that's going to look like on the subsequent pages. Reluctant, resistant sponsees might need reminders of previous work, etc. I've heard in meetings this is called the 1, 2, 3 waltz, which is, of course, going through 1, 2, 3, steps 1, 2, 3 again and again and again until we're ready to do whatever it is we're about to do, which in many cases is a step. The sponsee then does the work and calls the sponsor when done. The sponsee reads the work to the sponsor. The sponsor listens. Sometimes the sponsor might decide to share experience, strength, and hope. Personally, I do this when the sponsee sounds especially hesitant, confused, or this one's kind of big, ashamed. Because I get to remind them that they are not alone in experiencing some of the things that they have experienced. When the sponsee feels done with the step, I go through the step again with the sponsee and we read the section over again together. And this time, every time the book says something like, we become ready to let go of such and such, I ask, do you feel ready to let go of such and such? And they get to answer yes, or they get to answer, I know I probably am being asked to, so I'll do it. And, sometimes that's what we can do. But it also is a great indication of what do we still need to talk about before moving on. The book often makes assertions or asks questions. And so, for example, on page 1, It says we want to feel good about ourselves and live abundant, fulfilling lives. So I'll say, do you want to feel good about yourself and live abundant, fulfilling life? And the sponsee often says things like yes. So that's what's going on here. It has just occurred to me that I haven't done crazy things like talked about my experience. So I will make amends for my behavior and do that now. I first came to program many moons ago. And my first time through the steps, I decided to do a step study with a bunch of newcomers. And we used non-CODA literature. And that meeting started with approximately 12 members. And by step 4, we had 4 members. And we ended the steps with 2 members. At about step 5, I realized I needed a sponsor. So I called someone and asked that person to sponsor me, read my step 5 to that person, and then that person knew too much about me, so I immediately stopped calling. And then I kind of hung out in program, realized that that wasn't working, so I started calling that sponsor back again, and managed to get through the steps, occasionally reaching out to that sponsor, but also with the support of my co-step study buddy sponsor guy. So yeah. I then found a new sponsor and started working the 3 steps in 30 days, which is provided by SoCalCoDA. And I got through those, and that was fantastic. And then that sponsor moved away. And calling long distance was too much of a hassle for me, I guess. Then I got another sponsor, and then discovered that that sponsor was not safe. And then I found another sponsor. That sponsor was my sponsor when this was presented to me at World CODA in Arizona. And when I went to the workshop on this at Arizona, I suddenly realized, wow, the steps go way deeper than I have done them, so I'm going to start over. And I did. And I didn't really discuss with my sponsor that I was doing it this way. I just read everything that I was doing to my sponsor. Do I recommend that if you are a sponsee and you want to try this, that you do? Sure. If you're brand new to this program, I'd like to suggest that you bring this up to your sponsor and ask your sponsor to guide you through this, because, as I've mentioned, it's very easy for me to lie to myself. And I don't know if that might be true for you. I'm not going to prescribe whether that's true for you. I look forward to you doing some self-assessment. There's a little note at the bottom of this packet here. Consider what focus the work will take. If it's the first time through the steps, I find that it's rather unfocused. For me, because it was my second and a half, third-ish time through the steps, I did a big focus on resentments and childhood abuse. And so that was the focus that I took as I went through it. I've worked something like this on time management and service boundaries. I've worked things like this doing, more focused on interpersonal relationships. So being specific on, are we going to bite off the whole pizza at once, or are we going to take little bites, little slices at a time, can make this feel more manageable. So yeah. Another thing to consider is, are we going to alternate steps and traditions? When I'm taking a sponsee through the steps, I always suggest very, very highly. One of my more forceful suggestions is to go back and forth with the traditions. Because I suggest to my sponsees that they start service work right away at the meeting level. And because of that, having a grasp of the traditions is important. And what's fantastic is higher power provides for the sponsees, as well as me, whatever they need. So when we're having Tradition 1 issues in our business meeting at the meeting, usually I've got a sponsee in the meeting dealing with Tradition 1. And we get to not necessarily talk smack, but we have real life examples that we can point to and talk about those things. I'm a big fan of the CoDA 12 Steps and 12 Traditions workbook for going back and forth. But Chapter 4 also talks about the steps and traditions. And CoDA World has tasked the CoDA Literature Committee with making Canada's relationship toolkit, which is a focused 12 traditions deal. CoDA Literature Committee is about to send that to core, I believe, in San Diego, if that hasn't already happened. Okay, I'm getting nods from other people who I trust to be informed on this sort of thing. I'm very excited. I hope you might be excited about new literature. I've thumbed through it. It looks fantastic to me. But attraction rather than promotion. I hope that you will pick it up and decide for yourself. All right. So, there are 3 pages here of all sorts of things to consider. There is absolutely no way I can get through all of this in the time allotted. There is one thing that I wanted to point out that I added since this has been printed, and that is in step 8, real quick. In paragraph 3 and 4 of step 8, step 8 in my book starts on page 56. I'm sorry, just paragraph 4. It talks a lot about things that we are looking for as we make our list of people to make amends to. And it's a little bit focused on the amends to self. And so the sentence at the bottom of the page says, have we, as a result of neglect, ignored our personal needs or those of our mates and children? Have we secretly held on to resentment, bitterness, or hatred toward those who had neglected, abused, or abandoned us in our childhood and adult life? So sometimes the book is maybe, I'm not going to use the word hinting, but sometimes the book is saying things that it takes me some time to figure out. And so as I was listening in the last workshop about peeling the onion, I realized, there's a lot of times where the book doesn't even know that peeling the onion will exist yet, because when the book was written, it didn't. But there's a lot of things in there that peeling the onion has more information about. So here, have we secretly held on to resentment? I underlined secretly, and I wrote communication handout. And so this is a place where the book, in my opinion, is hinting, hey, the communication handout might help you here, because when I'm secretly holding on to resentment, that means I'm not communicating those resentments in healthy ways. And so if I look at the healthy communication pamphlet, it will give me more specific information on what sort of communication I have been doing in my past and what sort of communication I'd like to start using as I make amends, in this case, living amends to myself, but also amends to other people. Additionally, it continues, and it says, can we let go of fear and resentment as false power and establish healthy boundaries? So this is a place where, hey, the boundaries handout exists, so I can read the boundaries handout, find out more about what healthy boundaries might look like, etc. Additionally, the frequently asked questions chapter exists. It's chapter 5 in the book, and there's further conversation about boundaries, about inner child work, about 13th stepping, about all sorts of things. And the little blue book ends basically right after that. There's a little bit about the history of CoDA before that. So, I want to talk to you about every single thing in here. I guess I should mention that boxes tend to mean this is a thing you're going to do in a loop many times. Well, no. Step 9, that's true. Step 1 when I do step 1 with a new sponsee, I start on page 1. And I go through chapter 1 and chapter 2 with them to establish the pattern. And then in step 1, when we're doing step 1, if we've done chapter 1 and chapter 2 well, step 1 is going to say, hey, go back into chapter 1 and look at the patterns and characteristics. And I get to say to my sponsee, hey, remember how you were frustrated about how long this was taken? Well, guess what? You've already done that. High five. And they're, oh, yay! Hey, I've been doing step work this whole time. And I wrote directly in my book, yes, that's right. You haven't just been painting my fence. You've been learning karate the whole time. So, that's what the boxes mean. At this point, I would like to make this more interactive than it's been so far and invite you to take a look through here and see if you have any questions, see if there are any particular steps that you'd like me to talk about, etc. Looks like I might already have one.
Yeah, Troy, Codependent.
Hey, Troy.
Under step 2.
That's fantastic. Troy's question is under step 2. It says paragraph 7, how do you feel about / what is your current concept of higher power? And then there's a tab, abusers or beneficials. So, I'm going to turn to step 2 because honestly I don't remember what that means at the moment. Paragraph 7. Let me make sure I know what I'm answering. There we go. Okay. A review of chapters 1 and 2 can help us clarify our concept of a higher power. In our childhood, our higher power may have had personality traits similar to authority figures. At times, God may still resemble a punishing or shaming person, like a tyrannical spiritual leader, family member, or friend. So, as you can see, I've underlined this in yellow as a warning. Watch out, these might be things that you think. Then it goes on to say, we find it helpful to list the personality characteristics and traits of a higher power with whom we do have or would like to have a relationship. So, it says, we find it helpful to list. And based on my new understanding of how to read this book, I interpret that as make a list of the personality characteristics and traits of a higher power with whom I have or would like to have a relationship. Okay? Now I'm glad you pointed this out because I have written the next line, I've written parentheses around these next lines. This can help us determine if we have transferred personality traits and characteristics from our former or present abusers to our higher power. So when I'm looking at my list, I'm going to say, okay, is this a thing that I believe my higher power has because it's something my abusive adults in my childhood had? Or is this a beneficial trait? And I'm going to put little check marks or B's and A's or whatever works for, in this case, the sponsee. Come up with a code for your list so that you can say, these things are things I want to work to eliminate from my concept of higher power. And these are things that I want to cultivate in my concept of a higher power. Does that answer your question? Thank you. It was presented by another member. That person had a one-page front and back that was basically just pointing out where the promises are in each step. And I'm a detail guy. I hope that's okay. It's okay with me. I hope that you get something out of it is what I mean by that. Do you have a follow-up question?
Well, because I probably like some, I sponsor the way I was sponsored. Mm-hmm. And so this is all new to me. This is really interesting because I sponsor specifically with the Green Book and utilizing those questions, which was almost a parenthetical at the bottom of that first page of, you might want to use the Green Book and answer questions and all of that there. Yeah. So I haven't used the Blue Book as a guide through the process. It's been exclusively the Green Book. And then I've heard other people use the Purple Book. So and I guess my question really is, have you done sponsoring purely in the Blue Book? And have you also done it with the Green Book? And what's your experience with the differences between the two?
I'm going to summarize the question out loud for the recording. the question is, have I worked this way with sponsees? And have I worked any other ways with sponsees? Do I understand your question correctly?
Well, specifically with the Green Book.
Specifically with Green Book. Okay, so, yes. My current sponsees, I'm asking them to both do this and answer the questions in the Green Book. The traditions are much better covered in the Green Book. Yeah. But the questions in the Green Book are nice, and there's a couple of them that are different from what's here. But what I love is that they're phrased differently. So sometimes, and this is funny to me, they'll have a lot of trouble with a question in the Blue Book that is in meaning the same question as a question in the Green Book. But because of the way the Green Book is phrased, they have no problem with that particular question. I'm a big fan of the more questions I answer, the more writing I do, the more thorough my steps. I didn't mention this part. I've been sponsoring for a very long time. I did a sponsorship workshop back in 2009, and there's a recording of that out there that you might be able to find. I don't know if they have it here, but I know it's probably able to be found on the website. Talking about sponsorship, what's in it for me. And at that time I had a couple sponsees, and all those sponsees disappeared. And I would keep getting sponsees, and I would keep getting to like maybe step 2, sometimes into step 3, and they'd disappear. Since I started doing it this way, I've had 2.5 sponsees. But the 2 new ones to program, this has been the way we've done it. I've had my first sponsee get past, through step 4, and my second sponsee get to step 4. So,
Utilizing this with the Blue Book.
right. So, not everyone experiences the same. My experience is because I've done this way, I understand the book a lot better, I understand program a lot better, and I'm able to communicate that to my sponsees. And doing it this way, 2 out of 2 times, they've stuck with it. Now, 2 out of 2 is a terrible thing in the world of statistics. No one would accept that in a peer-reviewed journal. But so far, it's working fantastically. And again, I have been doing this process this way. I wouldn't run sponsees through this without being at least a step ahead of them. But yeah, I did, as you say, the other book. I did the Green Book. I did the 3 steps in 30 days. And this is the one that just, this is real, Jay. Come on, let's go. And it made the biggest change in my life. Have I answered your question? Okay. The small book is available through CODA. Different intergroups get it. This one's nice because it fits in my pocket, and it gets a lot more loved. I don't know if you can see, but it's been rubbed raw in places, and it's had liquid spilled on it, and it's dog-eared up, and I've got all my little Post-its and that sort of thing. The downside to this book is the margins are basically useless, unless you have tiny, tiny handwriting like I do. So if I were to do this over again, I would have done this in one of the larger books, but I want to make sure I've got the 3rd edition when I do that so that I've got the correct pages for the future. Paragraph 7. Okay. Going back to the book. Okay, so see, I'm learning something about this workshop. I need to write the page numbers on the worksheet so that I can find this faster. All right. So, step 4. Paragraph 7. We remember that our courage to complete this step doesn't come from the absence of fear, but our willingness to walk through it. So here I wrote, fear means face everything and recover, which you can find in the Tools for Recovery. That's called a pamphlet, I guess? Sure. In the back, there's a bunch of affirmations and slogans. That's one of them. We work toward understanding our strengths and weaknesses. our internal assets and liabilities, who we are, and what we've become as a result of our codependence. We look for understanding, not fuel to fire our self-condemn. I'm reading the wrong paragraph. Okay. Hey, thanks for your patience. Paragraph 7. For realsies this time. Thank you for allowing me to make mistakes. A variety of methods are available to complete step 4. One method is diagrammed on pages 44 and 45. In reviewing our lives, both the past and present, we list those people who have been affected by our codependent behaviors. So in here, I write, thank HP for computers. I did my step 4 here by opening up a non-brand name spreadsheet software thing. And there's a function where you can add an individual page, so you can have multiple pages. So what I did was I just had a page for each person, because I knew I was going to have lots and lots of resentments for each person. So I've got a page for God, I've got a page for myself, I've got a page for my mom, I've got a page for my dad, and then maybe I've got a page for certain big people in my life. And then I've got a page like, here's friends. Here's teachers or other academic people in my childhood kind of stuff. So that whole page is all them. Then I set up something extremely similar to this worksheet on pages 44 and 45. So instead of having the person along the side, the whole page is that person. And that gives me more room to type in each of the columns. It says, much of this inventory work has been hinted at / surveyed and work done so far. Hooray. And the way I'm going to find that is I'm going to look through all the work that I did in chapters 1 and 2, when I look through all the codependent characteristics. I'm going to look at all the questions that I answered in, where is it? The step 1 questions. I'm going to look over all the writing I've done, and I'm going to realize, holy cow, I've really already done a lot of this work in the explorations that I did in those chapters. Then I'm going to respond to the behaviors list in detail for each person or entity. And this is going to take time. Behaviors list in detail, chapter. So this is still paragraph 7. And paragraph 7 has this fantastic list of areas, behaviors. So it says, we include God, ourselves, our mates, children, friends, family members, coworkers, and people who participate in our various activities. In a second column, we list our codependent behaviors with each person throughout each relationship. Which means, I've forgotten the specific number, every single one of the 54 codependent characteristics, plus every single one of these behaviors, I'm going to check, have I done this thing with this person? And I'm going to be super thorough. And it's going to take a lot of time. But in the end, it's going to be amazing. And my sponsees look at that at the beginning, and they freak the heck out. And then we get to read. Specific behaviors may be difficult to remember. And so I get to remember that, I only need to get to what I'm doing right now. And it says later on in this step, I don't remember off the top of my head, it might say it on this worksheet, that we're not here on a witch hunt. We're not here to get every single thing. And from my childhood abuse recovery work, I've learned that higher power is only going to let me remember the things that I can handle right now. And so I'm going to do this process multiple times. I am 99% sure that I've told both my current sponsees that they will do this multiple times. And they're still working it. So, apparently that doesn't terrify them too much. It super inspires me because that means there's going to be room to grow. I don't finish these steps and they get relegated to the perfect people room because I have yet to meet a perfect person, even in recovery. Thank goodness for that. So then it says, when the sponsee has questions, the sponsor suggests call and actually talk to 3, then me. Because the question is usually, I can't think of an example of how I could possibly be silent with God. If God knows all my thinking, how can I be silent with God? A great question. Call 3 people. Write down what they say. Call me. And after talking to those 3 people, they're usually in a very different place. They might still have questions, and that's great, but what's really important for me to remember as a sponsor is I'm not God. I don't have it all figured out. And I'm going to give you a cheat code right now. My sponsees often tell me things that I've never heard before. Because my sponsees' support networks are often completely different people than my support network. And so it's a reciprocal process in terms of what am I getting. And it's amazing how many things my sponsees will tell me that I'm like, under my breath, uh-oh, got something else I got to work on. All right, well, thanks higher power. And that sort of thing. So yeah, how could I victimize God? Oh, good question. Go call 3 people. In fact, call 5. So that's a great transition into paragraph 10. It talks about the assets list. My experience with brand new sponsees is they tell me that they've, I've thought of 1 or 2 things that are good about me. Is that enough? And I shared in another workshop, but I'll share again. This is a great time to call other people and say, I'm doing my step 4. I'm having a little bit of trouble coming up with positive things about myself. I was wondering if you could tell me some things that you see in me that are positive. This is technically outside literature. Dante's Inferno. Virgil takes a friend into hell to hold a mirror for him. Because he knows what's going on in his head, but he can't see what's going on outside of him. And so his friend holds the mirror. And in that way, see, it's really just a metaphor. In that way, the other people in program hold a mirror for me and reflect back to me the positive things. Because in my head, I'm a horrible person. I'm a demon. But other people aren't seeing that. And earlier, during the panel, somebody was talking about this very thing, and I wrote it down. No one else sees my demons. And so if everybody else in the meeting is seeing me as a good person, and I'm seeing myself as a terrible person, coming to unity means getting myself on board with how everybody else sees me, seeing those positive things. So, good thing I came to this conference, or else I wouldn't have had that. Thanks for the question. Hang on.
Okay, so feedback on the asset list. So one of the things I had used, and I think this came from something I did in another program, but it was creating a timeline. So I like this idea of asking other people, but the one thing that helped me, I say like age 0 to 10, and then grade school, because age 10 to 20 is too much of a stretch, but in grade school, what were my significant accomplishments, or what good things did I do? Then junior high school. And things came out like when I was really small, I won a coloring contest at Cal's Roast Beef. That was a huge accomplishment. I won the 50-yard dash at the junior high track meet. Different things, in high school, I attended honors courses. When I was in my early 20s, I bought my first home. So breaking that into a time period also helped me nail down a lifetime of accomplishments that I wouldn't have otherwise been able to recall. So, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Kathy, and I'm codependent.
Hi, Kathy. Thank you for sharing. Did she project okay? A timeline of life to find times where you did esteemable things.
step 4, oh, I'm Marcus and I'm codependent.
Marcus?
When I came to do step 4, I asked my sister who had done the steps in another program as well, and her advice with the character. She just said to do resentments, fears, and harms, and to do it in that sort of timeline thing as well, of like, saying sort of like roughly 0 to 8, 8 to 20, and so on like that, and sort of break it down in timeline. After you'd done it, and I found that one of the most useful thing about step 4 is by looking at the timeline, because it allowed me to see where everything came from, where all my shitty behaviours, where they came from, that they weren't just, dreamed up by me, that it was lacks of education or miseducation through my life sort of thing. So when this lady was talking about the timeline thing, I remember doing that with the character defects and doing that with the sort of the, resentments and fears and harms. I found, rather than concentrating on individual people, but just to go the events in my life and to be more concentrated on the timeline thing, allowed me to see the inevitability of my mistakes and behaviour, and allowed me to be a lot kinder to myself afterwards. And I found that the biggest revelation of step 4. That was my experience with step 4, and it just sounds very different from this concentrating on individual people in your life.
Fantastic question. Paragraph 15 is here in bold for a reason. And the question is, should I make this amend? So, the question was, how do I know if I should make the amend? Thanks. Some of our wrongdoings may involve financial restitution, legal or business issues, emotional or sexual problems, or other sensitive areas. These amends may require investigation first. Talking with our sponsor and recovery friends, and seeking the guidance of spiritual, legal, therapeutic, and other professional communities can be extremely helpful in determining the best possible approach to each amend. So, what does that mean? The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write down the thing that I need to make amends for. And then I'm going to call my sponsor. I'm going to call some recovery friends. Maybe in that order, maybe in reverse order. Depends. Okay. My sponsor or my recovery friends might suggest that I talk to some of these specialists, the therapeutic community, the legal community, etc., for the best way to make each amend. Do I have an example from my own life? I really don't. Will you suffer me repeating something someone else said? Okay. I heard a speaker talk about making amends for having stolen some drugs from a drug dealer. Okay. It was suggested to him that knocking on the door of the drug den and saying, "Hey man, I stole these drugs from you and I'm really sorry," is probably not the most self-caring way to go about making amends. Also, making amends to Mr. Evil is probably not a thing. So in that particular case, the sponsor suggested, here's some ways you can make living amends. And in that particular case, of course, it's let's continue this journey of helping people get out of addiction so that they don't have to steal drugs from Mr. Evil or whatever. Yes? If I need to make amends to someone by setting up boundaries if I need to make amends to myself and the other person is not abiding by my boundaries, I might need to seek a legal professional to come up with a legal way to keep that person from approaching me. So in this particular case, we're talking about like a restraining order or something. So there are times where these things are going to be important. This is a spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't been through the steps. In my experience, doing step 9, I've discovered that the majority of my amends for codependency are self-amends. In fact, practically every amend is self-amends. Now, often that means I'm going to make an amends to myself by setting a boundary. Now I have to communicate that boundary to other people. But there are times, especially if we're doing CODA as our first program, but also seeing other things, where these things are going to be very important. I could improvise a thing where we all talk to each other about how great sponsorship is, or we could have a pep rally about how great the book is, but I think I'm just going to stop, and we can do that after the fact. I really appreciate you all coming here. I want to make a quick pitch for just saying that the book is amazing. And every time I have a moment where I'm reading the book and I say to myself, no one in their right mind would do that, the book says, no one in their right, you might be thinking, no one in their right mind would do this. And here's some things to think about. And I have many people in my life who say, thanks, book. You know me. It's crazy. So I encourage you to break the spine on this book and make it look loved. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for letting me be of service. Thanks for coming to the conference.